This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Mike Sedita.
Hello out there. Welcome to episode 42 of the Good Neighbor Podcast. We have the pleasure today of being joined by Rick Schmidt. He is the co-owner of Bach to Rock in Lutz, as well as Bach to Rock out in Lake Mary near Orlando. Rick, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Mike, thank you so much for letting me come in and spend a little time with you and check out all the stuff that's in your office. I like it when we do video so we can see everything. I can see.
Listen, you know what? I'm so not prepared. I should have actually had this on so that we know we're on air in studio. So I got little props here and there too. So, and I have an English bulldog sitting right across from me, giving me the stink eye through the entire. So I'm like under the gun. There's a little bit of pressure.
It's totally fine. I've got a Dalmatian and a golden retriever in my peanut gallery behind me, so we're good.
Listen, the fact that you're keeping a Dalmatian under wraps, like a bulldog, he's just going to sleep here. The Dalmatian is normally bouncing off the walls, I'm assuming.
He's pretty chill for a Dalmatian, so he's good.
Nice.
He's a good dude.
So let me give you a quick synopsis of what the Good Neighbor Podcast is, how we got started, and the whole premise for why we do this. So back in 2020, when COVID was rampant in Florida for that 5-6 month window, not like everywhere else in the country where it was 2 years, a guy by the name of Charlie McDermott in Southwest Florida said, "Hey, look, how do I get local businesses in front of people in the community, in front of other entrepreneurs with tips about things that are going on? How do we make that connection without, we're still having social distancing?" And he came up with the Good Neighbor Podcast. And in 3 years, now we're national. There's podcasts just like this all over the country. I'm fortunate enough to be the person who handles it here in Tampa. And today I'm really fortunate because just talking to you a little bit before the podcast, you have a very interesting story. Before we get into some of the stuff about Rick, let's talk a little bit about Bach to Rock. Tell me a little bit about the business.
So Bach to Rock is a music franchise. So we are nationwide. There's 53 Bach to Rock locations, but I own the 2 that are in Florida. So we have the one in Tampa and then the one in Orlando we bought out 2 years ago. And it is a awesome music school program. I would say probably there's nothing like it. But it's really cool for the kids of all ages. And I say that because we have kids, starting at 4 and we have kids that are 78. So it's a music school for all ages. Ours is a little bit different because not only do we do private instruction lessons for just about every instrument, we also do DJ lessons. We have bands. We have, I think going into the fall, we have 22 bands at the Tampa location and another 15 in Orlando. There's a lot of music that's coming out of Lutz. There's a lot of music coming out of Lake Mary, but it's really cool to see all this stuff happening. And I've been with Bach to Rock for about 5 years now, since we started our location at Van Dyke and Del Mabry, and it's just exploded. From day one, we've had so much community support. It's just been a really good environment for us to be in.
So let me ask you a question, like all franchises, right? If I open use the main one, like if I open a McDonald's, forget about what you need in capital and all that stuff to start it. There's operating material expense, right? Like I need to buy fryers and ovens and cash registers and all this other stuff. Bach to Rock, when you get the franchise going, are you providing for your students? I mean, is there drums and guitars and amps and mics and all that equipment? Is that in studio that they get to use when they're there? Or is it like I've been to I was in a band in high school, a heavy metal band, actually. I had a mullet. I had a very cool mullet, believe it or not. But is there like lugging equipment around? Is there people constantly lugging equipment in, or do you have stuff set up for instruction?
Our facility is pretty awesome. So all the Bach to Rocks nationwide, there's a rhyme and a reason to it. They help us with making some of the equipment decisions, but we just loaded up from Sweetwater when we opened up the school. We just did a huge order because we have a relationship with them. And I mean, our facility, we've got, 4 or 5 upright pianos all over the place. We've got probably 6 drum sets. All the equipment is there. If you go to bachtorock.com/Lutz, there's actually a virtual tour. You can see pictures of the school. But all the gear's there. I mean, kids are going to bring the guitars. They're going to bring, saxophones or whatever they're going to come in with. Certainly a lot of the band kids come with pedals and all kinds of crazy things, but all the gear, the amps, the DJ equipment, everything is there. So, you don't have to come rolling in with a piano and go, okay, I'm here for my lesson. And it would be cumbersome if we did. We've got almost 400 kids that go through every week. It's busy. So we have everything ready to go. We're in and out a lot of times, 30-minute lessons. It's quick how fast you can turn over 20 people in a half-hour period.
Well, that was the whole reason for my question. Like I've been on, like I said, like a battle of the bands where there's 4 bands, and from band to band, that's, I mean, even you go to a concert, today and see, like I saw the Scorpions last year actually, and the opening act has their stuff set up and they're doing everything, and even all the Scorpion stuff is behind it. There's still a turnover rate. So that's the reason I asked that question.
We've gotten really good. And my background was radio. So I used to doing festivals and line checks and all of the things that go into that. So my background's a little bit different than some of the owners, but we do all of our Battle of the Bands in Tampa at the Orpheum. And they were an Ybor. We started off with them there. And the guy who owns it, Jerry, his kids do lessons at my school. He's like, man, why don't you come and do a Battle of the Bands at my place? He moved to his new location on Nebraska, which is unbelievable. And that's where we do our Battle of the Bands now. So we have all of the gear set up. We just had 19 bands play in June, and we're line checking and go. We did all of that, 19 bands playing 3 or 4 songs each in 5 hours. And so we've gotten really efficient at doing those kind of things, at executing it really well. I've got great teachers. I got a great staff, which helps a lot.
Well, I'm going to save some of the Battle of the Bands stuff and upcoming events.
Yeah, there's some good stuff with the Battle of the Bands, especially right now going on with our elementary school kids.
I want to get into some of that stuff. The other question I had to you before I get into your personal story is, what is your staff like? Like, okay, so you do a 30-minute lesson. Are you set up where I'm assuming there's got to be where you could have 4 different lessons going on at a time, like 4 different groups where you have instructors. How big's your staff?
So we have 9 lesson rooms, and if you come in between probably 4 and 7, that's our busy time. All 9 rooms will be going, including the stage room. There'll be bands in there, so we're rotating through pretty quick. The teachers, I always say my staff is quirky but professional, and I like it that way. Whether you're a Berklee School of Music nerd, or whether you have pink hair or nose rings, or you've been teaching for 150 years, I think all of our staff is a little quirky in their own way, but they're great teachers. They're really good teachers. And, some of them are 20 years old and prodigies, and some of them are 55 years old and been doing this for 100 years. So,
I mean, that's the artistry, right? Like, I mean, my brain doesn't work that way. I'm a numbers guy. I've always been that way. Even though I do marketing for a living as my job, I've always been on the numbers side of marketing in all my career. So my brain doesn't work that way. I always had kind of normal hair. It wasn't until I got a little older where I could actually have tattoos and stuff like that when I wasn't working a corporate job. But listen, if I'm going to get lessons from a guitar teacher, I don't want him buttoned up, and I mean, I want Eddie Van Halen, not my librarian.
I get that. It depends on the kid. It depends on the student. I mean, we may have an adult student who comes in and they love the Eagles or jazz, and they're looking for a certain style. We may have somebody who comes in and loves Metallica, and they're looking for a certain style.
Right.
So we have a lot of variety when it comes to that. I mean, the 101 stuff. Those are all, scales are scales. That's not going to change. Theory is theory. That's not going to change. But over time, I think those little quirks, come into play.
And people
I think style is important. But honestly, sometimes the best teachers aren't Eddie Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen just became so easy, and he did so many things wrong. So you go, I don't know if I want my kid learning from Eddie Van Halen.
Right. And he pushed the envelope to do new things.
No, don't use your thumb. So there's a lot of stuff that comes in, with that. But I think it's different strokes for different folks. We have the recipe is never the same. We have a curriculum, but it's not like if Mike comes in and Rick comes in, it's going to be, here's steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They're all going to be, it may be, hey, Mike, we're going to start with number 4 because that seems to be perfect for you. You have a little bit of a strength, or that's your weakness. We're going to start with that. But Rick, on the other hand, we're going to start with number 2.
Right.
We bake the cake different for every student.
So tell us a little bit about your journey. You talked about being in radio. Clearly you're a musician of some sort. What was your instrument of choice growing up? I mean, when did you pick it up? Tell us a little bit about how you got from a young guy tinkering to now having these multiple schools?
So, what's really funny about this is I'm not a musician.
Really?
No, I mean, I could play the drums. Okay. I have never taught a lesson at Bach to Rock. That's not what I do. My background is music, though. I worked in the music industry. I worked in radio for about 25 years. I ran locally. I ran 98 Rock here in town. I ran back in the day. It was Star 95.7 when it was alternative. I ran that. I ran DC 101, and that's where Howard Stern was at one point. So I've run some big rock and alternative stations nationwide, but my background was more, I can pick hits. So when I was in Tallahassee, I found some band that was really good, and I started playing their song, and they were Creed, and they were a local band. And then I found a band. It was like, oh, I know those dudes from Gainesville, the Sister Hazel band. Let me start playing that and see what happens.
That's cool.
I really like this one singer guy. It seems like this is going to turn into something. When I get to Tampa, my new job at 98 Rock, I'm going to add this band Shinedown. So I had some good experience picking songs. So song structure and things like that, I'm really good at. When I left radio in 2006, I started working with my buddy who, oddly enough, managed Creed. He also managed Paramore and Seven Dust and a whole lot of bands.
Oh, wow.
So we opened up a label. We opened up a band management company that expanded a little bit. So I did that for a while. So I can tell you how to book a tour. I can tell you how to, A&R a record. I can tell you if the song structure's off. I can tell you, your bridge is a little funky, but I can't sit and tell you how to play
do it.
Something on a piano. I can find middle C, but I'm not going to be your guy for lessons. So I have a musical background. My kids, on the other hand, my kids are super talented, which is awesome, but they weren't when we opened the music school. So they've taken advantage of that opportunity.
So that's really interesting because, like me, like I said, I was in a hair band in high school. Like 1988 to like 1991, and then Nirvana happened, and hair bands kind of went away, and all that stuff disappeared. But honestly, that genre of music I love because it's from my childhood. But once I hit a certain age where certain bodily changes started to happen, my voice went from up at this high level to now I can't. I couldn't sing Scorpions. Barely could sing Scorpions then, let alone once my voice dropped. So the music changed for me, but having the ear for it, so maybe you're not a musician, but your ear for music and clearly knowing what to listen for feeds into what you do. So were you at all, did you ever have any interaction with Howard Stern at DC 101, or are you guys times totally different?
No, he had already left, and there was a Greaseman had come in after him, and then there was a guy named Elliot. So Elliot was there when I started off, and Elliot's been doing mornings there for 20 years now.
Oh.
But same kind of approach, very edgy, just as much as when I was in Tampa.
Right.
I had Bubba the Love Sponge here.
Yeah, Bubba.
Bubba was on, and I came in after all the craziness that was going on. I'm like, okay, we got to tone it down a little bit
with him and Hulk Hogan and whatever.
But I say that I ran a pretty edgy rock station back in the day. So what I'm doing now, this is my good karma to get back in the good graces of everybody. We came up with some crazy stuff, but I think the creativity and things that I came from radio world where it was, word of mouth and creating talk and all of those things. We just take a different approach with Bach to Rock, but certainly that's kind of important skill to have when you're launching a business too.
So it's funny. My only Howard Stern interaction, I've owned an ad agency for over a decade. I've done this for a while after I got out of a corporate job. And my only peripheral Howard Stern story is one of my brands needed to be on the Howard Stern show. The guys that owned the company needed to be on Howard Stern. So I bought a month worth of radio ads so Howard could do live reads for their brand. So that's my only interaction close to him. But what I've kind of done is I've gotten away from, in my ad agency, working with huge brands to doing what we're doing here, kind of talking to local business owners and finding out a little bit about what they do, because exactly what you just said, your experience helps you to run your business. What are some of the myths or misconceptions that you might run into? Like, what do people come in where they're thinking it's going to be one thing when they walk in the door, and you have to do a little bit of education for them? Like, this is not what we do.
I think we've been pretty fortunate because when we opened up, there wasn't a brand awareness. So we started with a clean slate. So the good or bad, there wasn't really anything that people talked about Bach to Rock. so that was good. So one of the things that I did right away was I just tried to establish partnerships with all of the schools because they have kids and we have so many A-rated schools around us. So I
Right.
went to Schwarzkopf and talked to the PTA president. I went to Hammond and talked to the PTA president. I went to McKittrick. And so I made the rounds with everybody that was within a 10-mile radius of us. And I think when you talk about misconceptions, probably the biggest misconception is we're only a music school for kids. So about 20% of the people that go to our school are probably 30 or older.
Really?
Yeah, there's a lot of bucket listers that come in, or there's a lot of parents. Oh, my kid's doing piano, so I had this guitar lit and sitting around, or my son's doing drums. I'd like to try drums at the same time too. So we'll, set them up with a teacher. The other thing I think with the business part of it is, they come in and they go, hey, okay, well, are you selling us strings or guitars? Or we don't sell gear. We just teach
Right.
lessons. You can find gear at, Sam Ash or Sweetwater or Amazon or Facebook Marketplace a lot more effectively than what we could probably sell it for.
Right.
Handle, in our 2,100 square foot facility in Lutz. I mean, it's not a very big place, so you don't want to have inventory.
Wow. So wait a minute. Time out. Just stop for a second there. 2,100 square feet, and you have 9 studios and a stage area?
So we have 8 in a stage area.
In a
But
stage
still,
area. That's still pretty tight. That's real tight.
when you come in, it doesn't feel that small. And I know it sounds really small, but when we laid it out, I was like, oh man, this is going to be tight. And then when you get in there, I've heard this probably time and time again. Wow, this place is a lot bigger than what I thought. And we still have 2 bathrooms and a wash closet and an office. We have a control room for our recording studio. I mean, we've got a lot sandwiched in there, but it feels pretty spacious. It's surprising.
Okay, so then I have a question off of that too, because now your wife is your co-owner. Is she on site with you regularly? And the reason I asked that question is this. I just remember band practices when I was a kid in my friend's basement, and just must have driven his parents crazy because, again, the genre of music we're talking about, we didn't practice on 2, we practiced on 10 or whatever we were doing. How loud is that place between 4 and 7? And is your wife like, look, I'm never showing up between 4 and 7 o'clock?
She comes in when my son's doing lessons, or she'll
Okay.
come in occasionally just to kind of check things out. She's sort of, the quiet co-owner. We like to use her brain because she's great with strategy and things like that. But it does get loud. Stage room's loud. I mean, anytime you got drums, you're gonna have. But we sound mitigation and the things you have to do to not just keep your neighbors happy, because otherwise T-Mobile next door. I mean, Tijuana Flats tells us all the time, but they're 3 or 4 doors down. They're like, hey, their bands are practicing. I heard them doing Rage Against the Machine. And because they're out back, they'll hear it. But, if you've got it cranked up all the time, you're not going to be able to do your cello lesson or your violin lesson or your vocal lesson if you're, rocking out like it's a club. But it does get loud. I mean, especially some of the bands that we do that are doing System of a Down or, the really louder material.
Heavy. Yeah.
You're going to hear the singers down the hall a little bit.
So we've established that you're the ear, your wife is the brains, and the kids are the talent. That's what's going on. In
I like to say that I'm the eye candy. That dashingly handsome fella that, that sits at the front desk from time to time.
Listen, we can all tell ourselves a lot of things. I'm Brad Pitt's stand-in occasionally too. So it's
if there was a modeling career, I would be the before. So I get it. My part of all of this is, I have a because of what I was doing, a marketing background. I was the marketing person for the Mahaffey Theater. We were doing the Rowdies. I mean, I did some of that too before we opened up the business. So, I'm used to dealing with a little bit of the chaos of the marketing. She'd call me and I'd be like, I've got the Penguins here. I've got, the wrestlers coming in, and I've got a band coming in. What do you have going on? Oh, I'm working on this pivot table and the spreadsheet. Okay.
All right. You go do what you're doing. I'll do what I'm doing.
Correct.
So, all right. So you kind of have, listen, we know as entrepreneurs that listen to this, and we talk about this all the time. Everybody says to themselves, if they're working a corporate job, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to make my own hours. I want to do. until they actually become an entrepreneur and they realize that the hours are generally 24/7, because even when you're sleeping, your brain is going to think about the things you have going on. You have a pretty cool job. I mean, you're dealing with helping, educate and teach people something that's enjoyable. It's a pleasurable thing. So it's fun to begin with. But what do you guys do when the kids aren't playing instruments and you guys aren't in the studio? What are you guys doing for fun outside of that? Are you campers? Are you skydivers? What is kind of the hobby outside of the studio?
That work-life balance thing, we're still working on that.
Working on it.
No, I mean, we're just like every other family. We've got 4 kids. So during the life cycle of this, I had 2 at Steinbrenner. I've had, my little one's 12. So we're still busy with soccer practices, and I call it, adulting. I am an Uber driver like every other parent. I drive my kids somewhere. They give me no great reviews and no, tips or anything, but I'm expected to provide great service to them. When you have kids, you're still doing a lot of those kind of activities. So we'll go bowling, or we'll go and putt, and we're like everybody else, going on vacations and things like that when we get time. So you have to do those things, but a lot of it is revolving around what your kids are doing. And I've got a 7th grader, so
So what are the age ranges? The youngest is 12 up to
24.
24. And the 24-year-old is still at home or out on their own?
24 is in Jacksonville, wrapping up college. Nice. And I've got one at USF right now. And then I've got another one that's 18 that's just getting started on things. So it's like I've got 3 in the adult world, and then I've got the little ones still. So
do you guys have a calendar in the house, the 12-year-old, like counting down days till the 18th birthday? Is there some sort of like sheet of paper that you're ripping off, waiting for the empty nest?
Parker is more of a, hey, I like being the little one. This is, I am enjoying the I don't know how to do this chore. I'm only 12.
Yeah. I'm the big man of the house until it's time to do any of the work, and then it's, hey, I'm just a kid.
Now lately he started doing the I'm TikTok famous. I have 4 million views on TikTok with my band Screaming Metal Death Trap. I don't know if I need to do this garbage run. That hasn't worked out well for him.
It's that, I would think that probably wouldn't work out too well. You and I seem to be around the same age. We probably had a different upbringing where that wouldn't have flown in your house. I know that would not have flown.
I've got military parents, so
forget it.
That did not fly well. So,
so for you personally, I mean, you opened the first location in 2018. When I talk to people on this podcast and I ask this question, a lot of times I'll get COVID as part of the response. But in your personal background, let people know, like, listen, you have 2 successful businesses. You basically are Bach to Rock in Florida. That's it. You've started one from scratch, which takes a whole bunch of stuff to do. You've had a career in radio and in entertainment for a long time. You get to this point and people see you here, but what's a time in your life where you've had a hardship or something that's come up where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this, but you're able to flip it and galvanize yourself and turn the story around?
I don't know if I've been pretty lucky, but I think that starting the business was probably the toughest part for myself and my wife, because we didn't know how funding worked. And so we always wanted to open a business. We thought, okay, this would be, if I could just get the opportunity, but if we had enough money to do it. And it took me bumping into this really, really nice man named Joe. I love this story because I met Joe when I was at the St. Pete Museum of History. I was doing marketing for them. And I was like, okay, we're going to open up a business. And we were looking at a different franchise, not music related at all. And this guy, Joe, he came in, oh, well, I do a podcast thing. I'd love to, he runs something called radiostpete.com. I'll run some PSAs for you. And Mr. Nice Joe, man, started doing that. And I said, wow, how did you end up doing this? And he goes, I kind of did a little bit of radio back in the day. And I'm like, well, you're retired now. What was your job before that? Well, I was the CEO of Valpak. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, you got a little juice. And then I just kept doing stuff with Joe, and I did some voiceover work for his little radiostpete.com thing. And then I said, yeah, I'm thinking about trying to open a business. And he goes, well, if you ever need any franchising help, I'm pretty knowledgeable on that. I'm like, oh, what do you do? And he goes, well, I'm on the board of the International Franchise Association. I'm like, Okay. And he goes, I'll look at your FDD. So he started looking at one. He told me that the business we were looking at, he didn't feel good about it. He goes, on your worst day, find something that you're passionate about. If you have a bad day, what do you want to go in and own and work at the next day? And so it was good advice. So I started looking at music and that was my background. So we poked around a little bit and we found Bach to Rock. He looked through it. It looked great. And then I said, that's great, Joe, but it costs a lot of money to open one of these things. Well, I'm on the board for Benetrends, and they help people convert 401k funds and do a rollover so that you could work with the SBA and do all these. I'll put you in touch with somebody. I'm like, who is this guy, Joe? He's like a superhero. And so me bumping into this guy helped us figure out the funding to open up the business. And it was probably about a 9-month journey to do it. So the struggle is real when you're trying to open a business, because I had no understanding. I know P&Ls and I know management and I know those things, but I had no idea how construction worked. I know how, when we were sort of struggling with financing and things like that, of how to make it work. I didn't have any background in that. That's why we went with a franchise, because I knew how to probably market and do events and do all the right things for it, but I really didn't have the understanding of curriculum. I didn't understand how construction works. So Bach to Rock was super helpful in that. And, they're small enough that they could be a little bit more hands-on than most franchises. So we got really lucky overcoming that situation of not having the knowledge or not having the funding. And, boom, flash forward 5-6 years, because all of this started about 6 years ago and we opened 5 years ago. So it took a little bit to get it ramped up, but that was probably the toughest thing during the time. COVID, yeah, we survived COVID and everything was cool.
Right.
We had a couple 2 or 3 months downtime, and that was a struggle. But I think actually getting the lift to open was probably the biggest challenge for us.
It's funny. Two things you said in there that really hit home is number one, having a friend. Listen, having owned an ad agency, I've worked with a ton of franchisees, right? There are horror stories about paying your monthly VIG to your franchisor and, signing up and putting all the paperwork and due diligence to get into X franchise. And then you get in there and it's almost like, hey, they're no longer available to you. You just pay your money every month. This is what your contract says. And this is how we roll along. And a lot of those franchises fall off or get sold by, to another person to come in or whatever. So I've heard a lot of horror stories about franchisees that say, I just didn't get that support from the franchise. It's great to hear that, Bach to Rock is growing, which is great with 53 locations across the country, but still small enough where they're able to give you that guidance when you're, especially in the beginning, when you're getting started, having that, I don't want to say safety net, but having that sort of guide rope to give you the ability to figure it out, but still be able to do it. Hugely, hugely helpful. And then the other thing you touched on there, there's this cheesy Gwyneth Paltrow movie called Sliding Doors where, she leaves one place 1 minute too late or gets there early and misses a train or whatever, and how the rippling effects of her life unfold. You run into somebody, wherever it is. We won't say it's Mons Venus. We won't say that's where you met Joe. We'll just say you met him somewhere in Tampa. But I'm joking, but the reality is you don't know every time you leave your house or every time a new student comes into your studio what that interaction is going to be with that person. If that person could end up being someone that just passes through your life, someone that passes through and affects it and touches it and sends it off on a totally different trajectory, or someone that ends up being a part of your life from this day forward. So having an interaction like that really is kind of like, I don't want to say a sign or, it's just having paths cross at a moment in time that causes you to send your life down a different path is tremendously spiritual, if you will, because you don't know when that occurrence is going to happen the next time that's going to do the same thing.
Well, it's funny because I'm just me naturally. I'm more of an introvert, which is crazy, but I really am. I'm a radio guy. I'd rather sit in a room and talk into a microphone, but I've gotten really comfortable talking to people. I ask a zillion questions all the time with people when they come in the lobby. Where do you kids go to school? What do you do? What's your deal?
Right.
I'm always curious about that because some of the best networking that we've ever gotten has been in the lobby where, hey, what's your deal? Oh, well, I'm a stockbroker, but, I'm the PTA president at X, Y, and Z, or I'm a head of the Lutz Chiefs football program, or, just even if it's just things that you're kind of connecting. Oh, well, you go to Northwest. Do you know this parent
Right.
over there? Oh yeah, we're tight. We went to high school together. A little sense of community, or I guess the network. I always say I'm 1 degree of separation from everybody. If there's always some sort of connection if you've been in the community, oh, well, you go to this church, or we love going to, this restaurant, and, Los Chapos. Oh, we have, the owners,
Oh,
we
you
have
know
tutor
so and
kids
so
there.
over
I mean,
there,
it's like,
right? Yeah.
there's always some sense of connection. I think when you're opening a business, the worst thing you can do is open it and not get involved in the
And
community.
isolate. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, but talking to people, my kids make fun of me all the time. They're like, "Oh, okay, well, when we get done, Dad's going to be talking to somebody for 10 minutes about, what they do or what's going on." It's just become kind of second nature for me. But if I didn't do that, or we didn't, our site directors and people and staff, I was like, man, so many missed opportunities if we hadn't done that.
It's the same thing for me. So, like, I do marketing for a living. That's what I do. I work in 11 of the nicest communities around Tampa. I mean, my face and Norman's face is in 12,000 homes every single month. And I see people, and my biggest thing, my issue, I did a Myers-Briggs. I'm an introvert that masks as an extrovert. If I have my choice, I would be hanging out with Norman most of the time. But when I have to, I can gear myself up to do this, to do interacting in the community. My biggest thing is I'm the worst person with names. My name is Mike. There's a billion Mikes on the planet. Somehow or another, when I meet, and I even do all the tricky stuff. I'm like, hey, Rick, nice to meet you, Rick. Oh, I love your studio, Rick. Like, I say it over and over again, and it's still, I'm terrible with it, but I have to gear myself up and kind of force myself to get into where I'm able to communicate and do that networking.
I'll tell you what, it gets really, really challenging for me because I'm old and I forget stuff. But between the two schools, we're probably somewhere between 350 and 400 students in Tampa. We're about 250 to 300 in Orlando, and we have bands, we do all these things. So not only do we have all the kids going through there, and you walk in and be like, "Hey, Aiden, what's up?" Oh, hey, Zoe, like all
Tough.
of those. But then you've got the parents,
right,
on top of all of that. And so, especially when you have newer families and things, I'm like, I sometimes just go and sit down. I'm like, hey, I'm Rick. I own this school and I haven't met you yet. What's your name? Let's go through. I'm going to interview you for about 2 minutes. Or the kids come in. I'm like, I love your shoes. I have to know where to get them. And I need to know what your name is, and I think it's just like, especially when you run a business, it's like the Cheers thing. Norm, when you come in and it's the first thing you say, to a kid, hey, Parker, go wash your hands. Hey, Axton, make sure you go do this. Matas, make sure you're, like, get your guitar ready. Just knowing names sometimes makes the kids feel welcome. Or
100%. 100%.
But it is a hard thing when you've got a lot going through and you're old and you can't retain stuff. So I think what you say, that little trick, I just force myself. We do have a cheat because we have a schedule on there. So I know generally who the next 9 kids are going to be if I'm at the school.
You got it.
Well, I'm going to narrow it down. Yeah. This kid does not have a guitar or drumsticks in their hands. So I'm going to narrow it down to the, 2 or 3. And
he's a boy and he doesn't have drumsticks. So he's here for the piano. That must be Aiden or whatever.
And it's either, there's 2 kids that are coming in, one's 7, one's 14. So I think I'm going to probably be able to figure out who's who.
So 350 or so students in Tampa plus parents. What's the capacity for the school? I mean, how many more could you actually take on?
If we could, Fridays is probably our weakest day, and we could always take on more there. But on an average day, we're rolling through about 80 students. That's busy. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Saturdays are pretty busy. We're not open on Sunday. I mean, if we could get more of the older students to come in who've got time during the day, that's one of the goals, to try to talk to the Del Webb communities and things like that of, hey, retirees, you're looking to come in and let's start a band, but let's come in and not so much loading them up on buses or anything. You're talking about active seniors.
Yeah, well, that's the Del Webb. That's Bexley. That's Del Webb. I mean,
that type of community. There's a lot of retirement community. That's one thing that we're going to do because we're pretty quiet from about noon to 2. So trying to utilize the space and the time that we have available where we're not really stressed out. that's probably the biggest growth opportunity for us.
Rick, this has been great. Let me see, if there's one thing people should take away from this, I mean, is it you're never too old to get started? I mean, what's the one thing you want people to remember about this podcast?
So I think that's it is a good thing. We had a lady named Karen who came in and she wanted to do DJ lessons. And Karen, I think she was like right around 70. And like, you want to do DJ lessons? And she came in and she goes, I want to learn how to DJ. I'm going to get some equipment. I'm tired of going to these parties where they play terrible music. I want to play 70s funk. And I'm like, you go, Karen. So Karen came in and started doing that. Then she's like, I think I want to learn how to do piano too. But 70-year-old Karen is somewhere out there rocking parties in the neighborhood, playing Kool and the Gang and stuff like that because she got tired of hearing music from the 50s. Whatever motivates you to do something like that, I think it's cool. I also think there's so many kids that are just wired into video games and things. Yeah. Man, get away from that for a little bit. Pick up a music instrument. It doesn't have to be guitar. You don't have to be in a band. You don't have to do anything amazing like that. Even if you just do it to kind of, I'd really like to play guitar because that's something that I'm interested in. You never know. I mean, you could be awesome at it or you could be not awesome at it, but it's a great thing for your brain. And I think it's a lot of fun. So, you never know if that 2-year-old's going to be a drummer at some point, but, I'm almost kind of worried about the parents. I'm like, hey, get away for 30 minutes and do something for yourself too. That's always fun too.
Go down the street to tacos and tequila. What's down the street from you?
So Tijuana Flats. So we're right in our plaza. We have a huge LA Fitness. We've got Home Goods, and so we're right on the front of the plaza with Tijuana Flats, Jersey Mike's, Great Clips, T-Mobile. We're all right.
Go get a sub. Go get a haircut. Go to the gym. Do something.
We're pretty easy to find. We're right on the street in Dale Mabry, so you'll see. Oh, that's where that. We've had people tell us all the time. I've driven by your Bach to Rock so many times, and finally we just came in, and when we were eating tacos on Taco Tuesday, and and then suddenly they've been doing lessons for 2 years. So,
that's awesome. Yeah. So it's never too late to get started. If I want to get started, Rick, what's the best way? Is it going to your website, your Facebook page, just calling up and setting an appointment? How do we get a hold of you?
You could always, Google, is the power of Google, bachtarock.com/Lutz. But the best thing to do is call or text. You can text our main line. So it's 813-398-ROCK.
Awesome.
Or you just Lutz at bachtarock.com. And, I promise you, it's one of those things where we'll set you up. We're not doing a money grab. Come in, do a trial lesson. Let's see if it's a good fit for you, and then we'll go from there. So
awesome. It has been so great to have you on. This is probably the longest podcast we've ever done because normally we try to keep them because our attention span.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I know.
No. It's been great because I have the attention span of a small farm animal. Like I can't stick with it, but it's really interesting to see how you guys got started. It's really interesting to learn and hear your story. Rick Schmidt, the co-owner of Bach to Rock in Lutz. Guys, if you're looking to take music lessons, remember, it's never too late. Reach out online and contact them. Rick, thanks again for being with us.
Appreciate it, Mike. Thank you so very much. We appreciate it. And I'm glad that you're our neighbor. So thank you for helping us be part of the community too.
Awesome. We'll talk to you soon.
See you, buddy.
Thanks for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast Passcode. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnppasco.com. That's gnppasco.com or call 813-922-3610.